Hi, I'm Catherine from the Delafield Quilt Company. If you're new here, I love sewing and quilting, and I love sharing the projects I'm working on and how I made them. This video is block number 7 of the Slow Summer Stars quilt series. If you're sewing along, I am putting the cutting requirements on our website at delafieldquiltco.com, and there's a link at the top of the page called Slow Summer Stars series. So let's get started with block number 7. All right, so I have my fabric chosen for block 7, and I'm going to actually use this as fabric A, this nice blue color, and then the lighter one as fabric B, and of course I've got some of my background fabric here as well. So the pieces that we need to cut for block 7 from fabric A, we're going to need 4 3-inch squares, 8 3 3/8 inch by 1 3/4 inch rectangles, and then we'll subcut those later. And then for fabric B, we're going to need 8 6 3 1/8 inch by 1 5/8 inch rectangles. And then from the background fabric, I'm going to need 1 4 3/4 inch square and 1 7 1/4 inch square that I'm going to subcut into 4 triangles, and then 4 3.5 inch squares. Okay, starting with fabric A, I'm going to cut my 4 3-inch squares first, and I'm just going to cut a 6-inch square and then cut it into 4. And I'm cutting it a little bit bigger than 6 inch because I'm going to just trim off these jagged edges from the layer cake square. And I'm going to cut it down into my 3-inch squares. And then to cut the rectangles, I'm just going to first cut a 3 3/8 inch strip for my longest side here. And I'll need to use this other part here as well, I believe, to get all 8 out of this. Okay, then I have my 8 rectangles. All right, and then to subcut these, I'm just going to split them into piles of 4. So 2 piles there. So we're going to want to subcut 4 of them from the left bottom to the upper right. And you just want to make sure you get corner to corner when you're cutting this. And then from the other 4, we're going to cut in the opposite direction. So now I'm going to go from bottom right to top left on the last 4 rectangles. Okay, so we have these subcut. I'm just going to set those aside. So first I'm cutting a strip that's going to be 6 3/8 inch wide from my fabric B. And you may have noticed that I swapped this out. It looks slightly different than what I showed just a few minutes ago, because I cut the first one wrong, but I'll save that for another project. All right, so I'm cutting it to 6 3/8, and then I'm going to subcut it into the rectangles that are 1 5/8 inch. And I'm going to use most of this layer cake square to get these rectangles. I got them all cut. As you can see, you don't have much left over from the square. And then for the background fabric, I'm going to cut my big square first. That is a 7 1/4 inch square. And I'm going to cut my 4 3.5 inch squares. I'm just going to cut a 7-inch square first and then cut it down to 4. And that's my 4 3/4 inch square. Okay, now that I got all my pieces cut, I can start putting this block together. And let me show you my test block. So I think the tricky part of this block is just getting these skinny flying geese ones, just because we're sewing rectangles and I don't have a quick way of doing this. If you know a quick way of sewing these skinny flying geese, I'd love to know that, if you don't mind sharing that. So I'm just going to show you the way that I use to put this one together. You do want to take your time in sewing this, just because it can be a little finicky and placement does matter when we're sewing the rectangle triangles to these squares here. Okay, I do find it helpful to mark a 1/4 inch seam allowance on the long side of these rectangles. So I'm just drawing a line at a 1/4 inch mark, and I want to go in probably about 1.5 inches. And that's going to help me place those half rectangle triangles in the right spot. Okay, now we're going to cut these so that they are these long, skinny triangles. And to do that, you just fold it in half. And then take your ruler and you're just going to cut it diagonally from the top, which is the open half here, down to the folded corner down here. And that gives you that long skinny triangle. And I'm just going to repeat that because you need that on all 8 of these. Okay, now to put these together, we're going to take our rectangles. So you should have a right side and a left side. And basically what we're going to do is take one of our lefts and one of our rights. And we're just going to place them here. And then to sew these on, this is where it gets a little bit tricky with rectangle triangles, is you need to start at the line here that we drew earlier, so that 1/4 inch seam. So I'm just putting the tip of that triangle, that bottom of it, and I'm lining it up along the edge here, and then I'm going to put a pin in here. And I'm going to actually just do the left side first on all of these, and I'll come back, press them, and then do the right side. All right, I got these all sewn on the left side, and I just press it towards the dark fabric here. And I'm going to come back later and trim off these dog ears, but first I'm going to put on the right triangle to all of these. And just like before, I'm going to use that pencil line I drew and start the bottom of the rectangle and just line it up against the edge along here and then pin it in place and then sew it as well. And I am using a scant 1/4 inch on all of my pieces. I don't know if I mentioned that enough, but I just find that it's really important, especially on this one, to have an accurate seam when you're sewing these pieces. So now I'm just going to sew these as well, and then I'm going to press them open. Okay, so now I've got these all sewn and pressed, and now I'm just trimming them down. They should be 1 5/8 inch high by 4 3/4 inch wide. So these ones can be really tricky to get the right size, and you just want to make sure that using the scant 1/4 inch, and if you're still having a little bit of trouble getting it to the right size, maybe just make your pieces a little bit bigger and then cut it down to size. Okay, now that I've got these all trimmed up, I'm just going to sew them 2 together like this. And I should have 4 sets of 2. Okay, now I've got my skinny flying geese all done, and that was the hardest part of this block. I think the rest you'll find this pretty easy. All right, we're going to set those guys aside, and then we're going to take the 3-inch squares from earlier from fabric A, and I'm just going to subcut each of these into 2 triangles. And now I just need to sew 2 of these to each of the white blocks that are 3 1/2 inches in size. And they'll just be sewn on like this. So I'm just going to do one side first, press it, and then sew the other. And to find where to place this, I'm just going to fold this in half, find the middle point of this triangle, fold this in half, and get the middle point of that. And then I'll just line those up, and I'm going to sew 1/4 inch along this side. Okay, now I've got these triangles on, and I just press it towards a triangle, and then I'm just going to come in with the second triangle, and I'm going to center it again and make sure that when you're folding, you're doing the original size of the square, and then just get that marked there, and then just like before, folding the triangle in half, and then lining up those points. And I'm just going to sew 1/4 inch, and I'm going to repeat that on these other 3 as well. All right, I have these all sewn and pressed, and I'm just going to cut the dog ears off of these as well. Okay, now I'm going to take my big square for the background fabric that's 7 1/4 inch, and I'm going to cut it into 4 triangles. And I'm going to just do that by cutting diagonally on both sides here. All right, now we're ready to assemble this block. So I'm just going to lay it out first, and then I'll show you how I put it together. All right, so I got all my pieces here. I put that 4 3/4 inch block in the center, and I have those 4 triangles I just cut and the pieces I sewed earlier. And so now to assemble this, I'm going to just go right down the diagonal middle here and sew these pieces together. And I'm going to sew this corner piece to these flying geese here for these 2 sides. All right, so I'm going to go sew these, and then I'll come back and show you what the finished block looks like. So I'm almost done sewing this, but I just wanted to show you quick that when you're sewing the triangles to these sections here, line up the bottom of this flying geese with one of the short sides of the triangle. It looks like it's too long, but when you sew it together, it'll turn out just fine. And here's the finished black. This was one of those blacks that when I was done with it, I was like, ooh, you're pretty. So hopefully you think that too when you put yours together. All right, let's just do a little recap of the ones we've sewn so far. This was black 7, black 6, black 5, black 4, black 3, 2, and black 1. So I hope that you liked this video. If you haven't yet, please subscribe and visit us at delafieldquiltco.com. Have a great day.